Welcome, and thank you for joining Between Sessions with Justin and Challie.
Just a quick disclaimer before we start. This podcast is for educational and conversational purposes only. It's not intended to replace therapy, counseling, or professional mental health care. We are sharing lived experiences and reflections, not prescriptions, and we encourage our listeners to seek professional guidance when needed. Welcome back.
Thank you for joining this week. We are going over some therapeutic language that we are hearing quite often, especially on the internet, like some common buzzwords around mental health or therapy, and seeing if they are harmful or helpful.
Yes.
What's the first one?
The one that I feel like I'm hearing the most, especially lately, is gaslighting. And we did a whole episode on gaslighting, so we don't have to spend too much time on it.
But it's so common. I feel like I'm seeing it more often. I feel like it's coming up even in younger kids. I'm hearing this quite often.
Yes. And I'm like, what do you know about gaslighting? That's crazy. Yes.
And like it can exist, not to invalidate, like it can exist, but it's just used so commonly inaccurately.
It is used inaccurately a lot. It's so important because the type of like emotional manipulation that is gaslighting is so hard to explain. So being able to have a word for it is so helpful because, yes, it's gaslighting. It is a form of abuse. Like being able to put a label on it, it is very helpful. Otherwise, you're sitting there trying to describe the manipulation. And one thing with gaslighting is it's really hard to describe it.
Right. It sounds wild. So it can be really hard to put into words. It can be really hard without having the proper terms to make it feel relevant so then we can get validated in it. But it is a very specific type of abuse where it's very malicious, it's very intentional, it is continuous pattern. It is very complex as well. So that's where it can make it so difficult to try and explain. So where do you think you're hearing it not used properly?
I feel like this might sound mean. I'm going to be a mean therapist, but people use it if they don't want to take accountability. So, like, if I were to call you out on something, instead of taking accountability, you would just say, like, stop gaslighting. But, like, that's not, like, if I'm calling you out on a genuine thing that you are doing that is upsetting me, I'm not gaslighting you. I'm having a conversation, but people are very quick to use that term and shut the conversation down.
So it's almost weaponized in a sense to like avoid that conversation, that deeper look at ourselves. Okay.
And some people don't know what that is. So then it's kind of like, wait, I'm what lighting you? I
And
don't
then
think.
you just kind of shut down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it is really commonly used in times that we're just like not getting the answer or hearing the thing that we want. So it's easy to kind of put that label on it. So then it takes away the accountability, and then for the person using that, it just invalidates whatever the other person is saying. So then we don't have to work on it, and we can shift the blame back onto them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And it's used in like random, ordinary disagreements. Whereas when we talked about it in our other episode, it's a pattern. That's what makes gaslighting so distinct, is that it is a pattern of manipulation. One conversation doesn't make somebody a gaslighter. There has to be a pattern with it.
And there has to be malicious intent.
Yes.
It has to be manipulation where the purpose is to gain power. It is not someone making a mistake one time or saying something that we don't like that maybe we don't agree with one time. Okay. Yeah, that is one that I'm seeing so commonly.
But you're right. I am seeing it among young children. And again, not invalidating it, more so impressed that they even have any idea about the terminology, but also a really good educational opportunity for young ones.
Because if we continue to just solely identify any disagreement as gaslighting, we're going to have really shallow communication.
Yeah.
And we're never going to take that deeper look at the way that we're treating people. Because it's valid that someone does not like or appreciate the way that we are treating them. And we can do something if that relationship is valuable. We can do something to change that. That's not gaslighting. But it has to be with good intention.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
What's one that you have been seeing?
I have definitely been seeing toxic all over. My ex is toxic. That person's toxic. That teacher's toxic.
Thank you, Britney Spears.
So, thinking about toxic, it is definitely a word that can be used to describe things, but again, taking the deeper look at it, it does not apply to everybody. It does not apply just because someone made you upset. That does not automatically make them toxic. Again, kind of this back to the pattern piece is when someone is toxic or that toxic relationship or toxic work environment, it's a pattern, a repeated pattern of continuous things that make the environment uncomfortable. It might be that the environment is to the point where it's really taking a lot away from us beyond just that discomfort of maybe being in a disagreement or having to push outside of our comfort zone. So it's many times used as like a blanket statement. What do you think?
I think it can be helpful to identify the reason behind it. Like if someone were to come to me and say that they were in a very toxic relationship, I feel like it's a good segue into tell me what that means.
Yeah.
Breaking down, like, was this a toxic relationship or was it just a disagreement? Like kind of breaking it down. So it's a good word to have. But I feel like it villainizes people.
Yes.
If I disagree with you and then I'm telling other people that you are just toxic, like that's a scary word. I personally don't want to associate with anyone who is a toxic person. Like I don't need that negativity. So if you're going to start labeling people as toxic, you really need to make sure you're utilizing that label correctly.
Right, like, it can't just be anything we don't like. I commonly hear it used in, like, work environment or school, like, "Oh, that environment is toxic. Work is toxic." There may be parts that we don't like about it, but is it truly toxic? Is it something that we just don't agree with, or is it everybody in there is against each other? Okay. When we're especially thinking about within relationships or in environments, I feel like it kind of excuses the accountability or excuses blame and it puts it all on the other person when maybe we are contributing to that environment because of our poor attitude. And then when we label it as toxic, we give up all of that responsibility or accountability.
Ooh, yeah.
Yeah.
Accountability is important.
Yeah.
And it does, yeah, if I wasn't the problem, it was just a toxic job. Okay, but now this is like your fifth toxic job in a row. So
Who's
may-
the common
maybe
denominator?
you are the problem. Sorry.
Right. So being able to truly take a look at that because the toxic environments and the toxic relationships do exist. They're there. But it's not normally everyone. Okay.
Okay, so maybe saying instead of saying this job is toxic, perhaps there are some toxic things about it.
Ooh.
Maybe instead of the whole blanket statement,
Mhm.
pinpointing really like what is toxic about it.
And that allows us to find something to actually work on. And when we identify what the toxic piece of it is, we can identify what it is we will accept and what we won't accept in other work environments or other relationships. Where when we just say that place was toxic, there's nothing. How do we prevent that from happening again?
Another one?
Yeah. What do you think another one is?
I have had many people label others as
Oh,
narcissist. I'm gonna stutter through that word every time. But yes, I have heard narcissist thrown around a lot. And I get it because if you know someone who is just in love with themselves, you're very quick to call them a narcissist. I don't know if this is more so just like clinically. I just want to be like, okay, but in the DSM-5, would they really qualify to have a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder?
because it's a pretty heavy thing. Like, that's a really heavy statement to put on someone, and it has really big repercussions. So, if we, again, kind of thinking about labeling each of our exes as narcissistic, that can be really tough because they may not really fit all of that criteria. They might have a narcissistic action or a trait. That might be true, but that's a heavy statement to make about someone as a whole.
Listen, I'm petty. You can label your ex, but let's label them appropriately. Like maybe instead of narcissistic, we'll just call them selfish a-holes. Like we don't need to bring the DSM-5 into this to be able to label them. Um,
This is so funny to like bring up now because I've heard again, it's gotten into so many more like kids or adolescents vocabulary. And I'm sure they're hearing it somewhere, whether it be family or YouTube or whatever social media,
God, YouTube.
it's so common and it's used as an insult now without even knowing anything about the person. But then we have prejudgment towards that person, especially if we're sharing that about someone else, especially in school or about a parent when we're describing someone. It can put a prejudgment or a stigma on someone.
I just think it's thrown around a lot more than it should be. It's a very serious diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it's almost like, we don't make fun of or overuse certain diagnoses, like, why this one?
Yeah. Almost weaponized in a sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I just feel like it's overused and it is a very serious condition that people can genuinely have. So labeling everyone with it kind of diminishes when it really exists. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like,
And it takes the power away because you can heal from something like that. But if you don't even know what you're trying to heal because you've just been labeled it forever, it can feel kind of hopeless. Or to even try and ask for help because you might feel like you're going to be judged or that there's going to be a stigma associated with it because it's used as a weapon so often. So it might actually be countering it and people may not be able to take accountability or seek healing. Okay.
and I'm not a betting woman, but I'd put money on the fact that like a high percentage of people that are labeled as narcissists, if they actually got like evaluated by a professional, probably wouldn't qualify as a legitimate individual with narcissistic personality disorder because it's not as common as you would think.
Right.
So I think we're mislabeling people when we could choose much better, more colorful words.
Another one that comes up for me, kind of thinking about that one in a similar sense, is boundaries.
Ooh,
So
but we
bound
love
we
boundaries.
do love boundaries. Love when they're used appropriately.
Yes.
It is not a way to get out of an uncomfortable situation. It is not a way to just avoid discomfort all around. Boundaries are set and maintained to protect ourselves. And we are allowed to set whatever those boundaries are that is appropriate, but we can't utilize it to get out of our obligations or out of just that uncomfortable conversation and again, kind of back to weaponizing it. We can be told that we're doing something wrong, or on the opposite side of it, we can be told that we are crossing someone's boundary and it should be taken seriously. What's your thought with boundaries? How do you see it showing up?
Yeah, okay, I love boundaries. I'm
Mhm.
the queen of setting boundaries. But when you set boundaries, it's really important that you're doing it for yourself to improve your well being. You setting a boundary, you can't control other people. So if you're setting a boundary to try to control somebody else, that's not healthy. So that would be an unhealthy
Yeah.
boundary.
I think you said that so perfectly of we can't just throw it on someone to get them to do what we want.
Right.
We have to set it for ourselves of what acceptable and unacceptable behavior we will encounter.
If my husband is listening to this, I'm setting a firm boundary that I cannot do the dishes. Sorry. It's a boundary I'm setting for myself. So that's an example. I don't know. I kind of like the thought of it, but that would be an example of an unhealthy boundary. But yeah, no, I mean, boundaries are very important. They protect us, they protect our mental health,
Mhm.
they protect us from people who we might label as toxic and narcissistic.
Yeah. And they protect our physical self. We might have a physical boundary that someone is trying to cross, and that's where super appropriate to use. Because again, that's something that is directly involving us. It's not changing someone else's behavior. It's removing us from that.
Yes, that's a really good way to look at it too.
Yeah.
We can't change other people's behavior.
So, kind of when we're thinking about setting or maintaining boundaries, being able to ask ourselves that question, like, what is my role? Am I removing myself? Am I not allowing that person to speak to me by getting up, walking away, or not engaging in that, rather than it being controlling what that other person is going to say or what they're going to do? Hmm.
Okay.
Boundaries are so important, though, but using them in a healthy way. What do you think another buzzword or
Oh, I have a good one actually. I don't know why I thought of it while you were talking about boundaries,
I
but
like that?
when we were talking about like things that like we can't control other people. Another one that pops up a lot is triggered, triggers, triggering.
This
That's
one's controversial.
I know.
Okay.
We're gonna get controversial.
What are we gonna say about this?
I think identifying triggers, your own triggers, is a very important thing,
Yeah,
but you can't expect other people to tiptoe around your triggers. Sorry, not sorry. But like to me as a therapist, you're making progress when you can face those triggers and not have a big reaction.
yeah,
Of like, don't get me wrong, I don't like big crowds, so I avoid them when I can, but I can't expect big crowds to avoid me.
right.
You know, like one time I was in the mall with my son and we were doing trick or treating and we got there early, so there was not a big crowd. Then all of a sudden, bam, there's a big crowd.
Mm,
But I can't say like this is I'm triggered, you all need to leave.
right.
So I think and that's a big example. Obviously,
Yeah,
everybody's probably listening and watching like, "Duh." But there are examples where like people will expect other people to kind of like cater to their triggers. Your triggers are real. I'm
mhm.
not invalidating them and they can seem completely random to other people that aren't in your brain, but you are not successfully processing through those triggers if you are just expecting everybody to cater to them. Like you need to be able to face them.
Because at the end of the day, if we do put all of that ownership on everybody else externally, we are going to live a very limited life.
That's true.
You know, it's something that when we're talking about triggers, they do exist. And then even taking it back a little bit farther, there's a reason those triggers exist. There is something that we had experienced that our body has now taken on and it lives in our body because our body remembers. There is a reason that it's there. And that is so valid as well.
Yes.
But we cannot give all that ownership away and expect other people to A, know our triggers if we're not communicating them, or B, expect people to just work around all of them. We have to make that progress to live our full life because they might show up and we may not have any warning that it's going to be there or it's going to exist. And it could be in really important moments in our lives that we might miss out on.
Mhm.
Thinking about triggers also is kind of identifying the emotional discomfort separate from what that actual trigger is and seeing what we can work through, not just, again, having the blanket statement of a trigger for any time we get uncomfortable or we don't want to do something.
I think one thing to show yourself that you're healing, because we talk about healing, is when a trigger can become an emotional discomfort.
Oh, so kind of like a different level.
Yes. If you
Okay.
can face what was once a trigger and yeah, you're super uncomfortable, but like for me, previously, if I would face a trigger, it would be bad. Like
Yeah.
panic attacks and my
Right.
chest would hurt and it would just be awful. And now I'm never gonna be comfortable with it. I'm still gonna have that feeling of like my stomach like "Ugh," but I can get through it. I don't have to
Yeah.
stop what I'm doing. I can just be uncomfortable for a little while.
And I think that being said shows a bit of the difference between of what an actual trigger is and emotional discomfort. The trigger is where the brain and the body is remembering and it shuts back down into survival mode.
Yes, fight,
It's
flight, freeze.
fond. Exactly. It's where our body has a physical reaction. Our heart starts racing. We might have that like really uncomfy feeling in our stomach, kind of like butterflies or knots. We might start sweating. Sometimes we can get a headache or even experience like aches or pains. And emotional discomfort is going to be more of the milder side of that. It might be we start to breathe a little bit heavy or we might start to feel some of that anxiety, but it's underlying. Maybe we're not going to get the full physical reaction. Okay. And you said panic attack. Like that is something that is so common when we're experiencing a trigger is then it because of that experience, we then move into a panic attack. And
Mhm.
that's a physical sensation.
Yeah.
I mean, people mistake that as a heart attack so many times.
Yes.
So thinking about the intensity.
There's a lot of people that end up in the emergency room because they feel that they're having a heart attack.
Mm,
And then they feel silly when they're told they're having a panic attack, but there's nothing to feel silly about. It mimics a heart attack.
and it's that serious.
It is.
So, like that being said, like how connected our mental health is to our physical health.
Mm.
That if it's our body is reacting that way, there is that much of a connection.
Hmm.
Yeah. So, in kind of thinking about the last one that we can cover is trauma. Trauma is so commonly thrown around and it exists, and we live in a world where there is a lot of trauma. Understanding a little bit of the difference, so like the stressful experience and the event itself that causes the trauma that lives in our body. So the trauma is the physiological and psychological aftermath from the event that had happened. The stressful event, many times this can be an accident, an assault, a war, natural disaster, so many different things. And then the trauma itself is what lives in our body afterwards until it's processed. And thinking about that is this is where triggers come in.
Mhm.
But our body and our brain, when we're still experiencing that trauma, hasn't fully moved past that experience. So we re experience it in a similar way.
Yes.
What are some ways you think that shows up?
Well, we already talked about triggers, so we
Hmm.
already talked about the panic attacks and stuff. I didn't know where you were going with this, and I was cringing a little bit because I was like, is he about to say like certain things aren't traumatic? Like, where are we going with this? Because I'm very like, what is a trauma to me might not be to you. And so I love that we're just talking about the difference between the event and the trauma. We're not
Hmm.
saying like, well, this, and this qualifies as a trauma. And then, but this event wouldn't be traumatic. Like, because I feel like that happens a lot.
So many times in clinical settings.
I have people so often, they'll like say something and then they'll say, but people have been through worse. So like I don't even know why I'm freaking out. And I'm like, yeah, but your brain doesn't know that.
Right?
Your brain doesn't live on a scale. It doesn't know that like, okay, yeah, your neighbor went through this worse thing. Like
Mhm.
that's not how your brain functions. Your
No.
brain functions trauma is trauma is trauma.
And even thinking about that, I would never discount or invalidate someone's trauma. If it's traumatic to you, then it is. Something to even add on to that is the difference between big T trauma and small T trauma. So, like the big T trauma are those maybe one or two really large things. Like this might be like that natural disaster or the abuse or terrible events that happen. And then when you look more at the small T trauma, that's going to be the ongoing stressors. That might be neglect, that might be stress or bullying or emotional abuse that is ongoing, and they just add up and they layer and they layer and they layer. And then you get into the really fun territory where they both exist. You might have experienced a really stressful event and then are also experiencing the stress and the bullying and the invalidation in your life. So they're layering on top of each other. And that makes it an even more of a layer to heal from. It can be done, but being able to validate that is going to be one of the first parts.
I am not super educated on like big T trauma versus little T trauma, so I'm gonna defer to you. Is one more impactful than the other?
No. And that's what so many times, well, labeling it of big T and little t, many times people are like, oh, well, the little t isn't that much. They still have the same impact. Again, like you had said, our brain doesn't register our neighbor's trauma, our brother's trauma different than ours. Again, it takes in the trauma, whichever capacity it is, and it affects our brain the same way. It puts us more at risk for chronic stress and physical ailments, whether it is ongoing or if it's just unresolved from the big event. So similar long-term effects and similar way of processing too.
Hmm.
Differences because everybody heals differently, but it's going to be very unique to each person, but it is not going to be a difference of impact of like, oh, you only experience little T trauma. It's not that bad.
That's actually very helpful because
Yeah.
because I've had people like, yeah, they're getting bullied, but like, it's not like they lived through a tornado or you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and they compare the two. And so it's actually really helpful to
Yeah.
be able to like differentiate like, okay, those big T once in a lifetime traumas, yes,
Mhm.
but also, huh, okay.
And so many times you tend to see it in a little bit older individuals, but they'll minimize their experience and compare it to people that maybe were the generation of, I didn't go to war.
Yeah.
I didn't do this. That's one that always comes up. Well, no, like your experience is just as impactful. You didn't live in their body. You don't have a comparison to it. Again, this is something that you talked about before of the way that our body and our brain reacts to things, it doesn't know if it's a bear chasing us or if it's a snotty email that comes in. We're reacting in a similar way. It's
Mhm.
the way that our brain processes it. Our brain, as much as it does, it tends to be lazy and it labels things the same. So,
Our brains are just lazy. It's not gonna distinguish trauma.
no. So, that is one. This is absolutely not to invalidate anybody's trauma because if it exists in whatever level and it impacts us through and through. This is for the piece of being able to label it correctly, of being able to give us the empowerment to work through it. Because living with trauma is going to have such an impact on us. And if we're never willing to resolve it or to work on it, we might continue to experience those same triggers or
Mhm.
experience the continued discomfort. And even to add on to this, I know this part was long winded, but we can be so successful in our lives, have the great job, the beautiful house, the kids, all the things, and still have that trauma existing in our body. And sometime it might show up, and it might show up out of left field when we're least expecting it.
Very true. Yeah.
So we can still live a successful life and have it, but at some point it might limit us, or it might be an underlying cause to something that we're just blaming on being irritable or being tired or that we don't eat well. It's connected to a lot more than we think.
Yeah. Well, we only had a few buzzwords, but
Yeah.
there's a lot more out there. So, how about for today? If you guys can think of any other words that you are hearing a lot of, like psychological words, leave them in the comments
Yeah.
to discuss and let us know if you think it's more harmful or helpful that those words are being used as buzzwords.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you guys so much for joining this week, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Bye.